Been showing well enough, Ingrid?
It's showing, yes, thanks, Hala. That's great. All right, so a very warm welcome to everybody who's here today. Hope still a few more will pop in as we go along. Thank you to our three sets of presenters who we're doing something unusual. We're presenting 3 books from within our forum. There's a lot of research and ingenuity within this group, so we're really looking forward to hearing about these 3 new books. And so just to welcome the first presenter, my colleague, distinguished Professor Hala Lotz-Sitka, who was a co-editor with myself and others on this book. So thank you very much, Hala, for presenting for us, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. And really, I'm just doing this pretty much on behalf of Ingrid, and the team that we were working with, Zintle Sonqahu and Sirka Chininganyamwe. So we are part of what we call a national teacher education professional learning community, and we're very excited that we've just launched this book. And I'll be just sharing a little bit with you about the book and a bit of its history. This is the book's cover, Teaching and Learning for Change, Education and Sustainability in South Africa. And you can see that it's been edited by Ingrid with the lead editor, Zintle, Sirka, and myself. And this book, of course, has a very long history. Its history is as long as the work we've been doing in education for sustainability in South Africa, starting with early days, learning for sustainability as we were transforming our national education system. We had a big program, which was some of the early work. We had a program with our Minister of Education, the National Environmental Education Program, which we called the NEEP-GET, which led to changes in our national curriculum. And over time, our skills system, our biodiversity strategy and action plan, our climate change white paper, all have taken on board education and have all emphasized the need for teacher education and for integrating sustainability into education systems, very much like this Global Education Monitoring Report did in 2016, and of course the new emphasis within the SDGs. So the book's history is the same history. It's got this long and extended history, and the Fundisa for Change program, which Fundisa means teaching for change, was really born out of a national initiative to try to strengthen our systemic impact in this particular context. And we developed this sort of project, sort of graphics to try to show this community of practice working together to try to address these very critical, challenging issues in our education system. So in 2012, we were able to launch this national professional learning community, and the Department of Education actually recognized it, and we were extremely excited at the time because we were getting national support from the government for this initiative. And of course, it was a project that was also linked to the UNESCO Chair and the INTE network, which Rosalind McEwen and Chuck Hopkins and others had pioneered, and we were part of that network. And one of the projects of that network was to establish these national professional learning communities. So this was our offering in this particular space. And we launched this initiative. There you can see the picture in 2012 with our materials and our program and so on. And since then, the program has been working with across the country in all provinces, with subject advisors, with teachers, with partners, environmental sector partners, trying to strengthen environment and sustainability education and learning in the national curriculum. And you can see here at the bottom the scope of partners that we've been working with across the teacher education institutions, government departments, and environmental and sustainability institutions. And here's just some pictures from our context. So you can see the kind of teachers that we're working with and the kinds of community that this project has actually created over time. So the book really emerges from a research component in this program, which we established about 45 years into the program, working across 5 postgraduate research programs across 5 universities. And what we were trying to do there was to research the interface between situated classroom-based learning and acquisition of disciplinary knowledge. And the challenge that we were facing was that a lot of the environment and sustainability knowledge in the national curriculum was new to teachers. So biodiversity concepts, climate change concepts, environmental health, sustainable development, water security, and more were all new to teachers, and they, green economy, other new concepts, and our teachers were not well prepared for this, both from a content knowledge perspective, as well as from a pedagogy perspective, as well as from, you know, the more, if you can call it, holistic, integrated ontological and epistemological dimensions of sustainability education. So we had two research objectives. One was to understand how situated learning pedagogy may contribute to acquisition of environmental disciplinary knowledge, and then to understand the ontological and epistemological nature of new environmental knowledge and its recontextualization into the school context. And that, of course, takes place via pedagogy and assessment practices and so on. So that was the initial program, and we were lucky that it was funded by the National Research Foundation, which gave us a strong impetus. And of course, it was also linked into our National Research Chair, which is focusing on transformative learning and green skills learning pathways, amongst which is the need to strengthen foundations of green skills, which comes up in the schooling system and the teacher education system. So we worked with a number of masters, PhD scholars over this period of time, and they all developed their studies and were supervised by many of us. Ingrid, one of the leading supervisors there, Zintle, myself, Rob, and others. And what Ingrid did was she innovated a process of trying to make the research more accessible. You can see here these little short summaries that's just sitting here in the middle, were little sort of 2-3 pages, which helped everybody to articulate their contribution to this national research program from a research point of view. And from there, we then developed the book chapters. And Ingrid was talking just now about the writers' workshops and the, you know, many interactions that we had to go through in order to get this book produced. So the book has 19 chapters. It's got 20 authors. It was a mammoth task, which I think Ingrid would be able to spend much more time telling you about, because she was really the lead editor on the book, but a huge project to try to bring all of this work together. And we were able to launch the book at the end of last year. So the book really tries to engage education for sustainable development as quality education in the Fundisa for Change program. And we've been working for a long time here in the Southern African region to bring together ESD and quality education. We've done a regional book in the SADC, and this is now a national book that we've done also on the same, with the same focus. So we've really been trying to develop depth and insight into how we can bring ESD and quality education together. So this is a little extract from one of Ingrid's slides. The book sets out to look critically and to present empirical research on environment and sustainability curriculum content, investigate the way it is taught and assessed, and to look deeply into the way we present teacher professional development courses, particularly in the Fundisa for Change program. So the book is 330 pages long, so it's not a small project. It's 19 chapters and it has 4 sections. And these 4 sections are the following. The first section covers environmental content knowledge in the curriculum, and I'll talk a bit more about that just now. The second section is focusing on transformative pedagogies for environment and sustainability orientated learning. The third section focuses on assessing environmental learning, which is most often, you know, the one that is left out. When we're dealing with transformative education, we forget about transformative assessment. And then the fourth one is teacher professional development for environment and sustainability oriented learning. So each of the sections of the book has got an overview, quite a substantive overview or orientating chapter, which is really a synthesis of that particular area of work based on this long history of research in the country and also internationally, also into the region. And then it has a number of theoretically informed and empirically grounded case study chapters. So we try to get a sort of a kind of almost a dialectic between the theory and the practice in the book all the way through. And just to show you the sort of structuring of the book, the content, knowledge, and what we're dealing with here is quite complex, uncertain, and essentially incomplete forms of knowledge in environment and sustainability education. And that creates particular epistemic challenges for teachers who really have been acculturated into, you know, transferring more sort of certain forms of knowledge. So it's a different epistemic context that we're looking at. And then, of course, the pedagogical practices we're looking towards is more transformative, active learning, expansive learning, types of pedagogy, and that also creates new challenges for teachers. And then there's the assessment of this, and so we need different models of assessment. So we talking in the book about assessment of significant ESD learning, which is more holistic, which emphasizes higher order thinking skills, but really also brings in values and relationality and so on into the assessment practice. And then all of that, of course, has got implications for teacher professional development. And then we're also needing different models, teachers' capabilities, competencies, partnerships, and so on that need to come into focus. So this is essentially what the book deals with, is all of that. And it is very closely linked to the original model that we used in the Fundisa for Change program, which is to, know your subject, improve your teaching practice, and improve your assessment practice in this particular epistemic and ontological context that I'm talking about now. So here is an overview of the book's sections, and I'll just touch on some of the chapters to give you a sense of what's there. But the introduction really is the chapter that brings into focus this relationship between ESD and quality education. And that was written by myself and Ingrid, Zinke, and Sirke as editors of the book. And then this first section of the book deals then with some of these kind of complex dynamics of environmental content knowledge in the curriculum. And the first chapter, Ingrid and myself look at the challenges and opportunities associated with this. And then we look at biodiversity knowledge. There's a chapter that looks at second chapter that looks at biodiversity, what teachers believe and say about biodiversity and the teaching of biodiversity. There's a chapter on teaching catchments and river management in geography by Gavin and Rob. There's a chapter on climate change, how to make sense of climate change in a national curriculum, which was written by myself, Caleb, Shanu, and Khomotso. And then there's a chapter on, looking at the content coverage in the grade 12 curriculum, which of course the highest stakes, big examination year for students in schools. The second section of the book looks at transformative pedagogies for environment and sustainability learning. And here, Ingrid has done a really great job of theorizing active learning, looking at it historically and bringing the emergence of this work together over the many years that it's been developing in the country and elsewhere. And then Ingrid offers a very nice chapter with one of her students on the nexus between environmental knowledge and environmental learning processes. This little diagram from below here you can see is coming from their chapter, where they're looking at the relationship between content knowledge and teaching practice. And you can see here the kind of complexities of the environmental content and then the related dynamics in terms of the pedagogical practices. Then there's a chapter on reviewing course-supported design research intervention processes, written by Rob, Shanu, and Janet. Rob and Janet are on the platform with us today. And then there's a lovely chapter also by one of the students that Rob was supervising, which is assisting learners to take up agency in problem-solving activities, which is a really interesting chapter looking at how transformative pedagogical models can strengthen learners' agency through the learning process. Then the next section of the book looks at assessing environmental learning. And this chapter, the sort of overview chapter, we try to really look back into the history of assessment and the way that assessment has been structured in formal education, all the way from the Bloom's, Bloom's and his taxonomy and how the taxonomy shifted. And then we made a big shift actually from there into this model, which we developed or adapted from Fink's notion of the assessment of significant learning. And we adapted that into ESD significant learning, and then looking at the dimensions of assessment and then how to develop those in practice. So really trying to rethink the assessment system for ESD over there. And that's followed by a couple of case study chapters, one looking at assessing of sustainability competencies, And then the other one looking at formative assessment for quality environmental learning in the natural sciences classroom. Also supported two studies that were supported by Ingrid. Then the last section of the book looks at what all of this means for teacher professional development. And here you can see a number of chapters by Zintle and Sirka, who have been leading the front really with the professional development, teachers professional development research in this area. Sirka did a wonderful PhD on teachers' capabilities when teachers, choose what it is that they want to know and do, and then how that actually shapes the possibility for productive teacher professional development. And then Zintle supervised another study focused on also teachers' capabilities and valued functionings in professional learning communities. And then we've also looked at teacher contexts as amplifiers and filters for environmental pedagogical content knowledge, which is a study that Ingrid also supervised and worked with Susan on. And then the evaluation, we've developed also evaluation tools for this kind of teacher professional development with Zintle and her PhD. So these are the sort of contours, if I could call it, of the different chapters and give you a good sense of what's there. And the most amazing thing is that we've been able to produce this book completely open source, an incredibly creative and very professional publishing company called African Minds, which is bringing the possibility to produce these kind of books open source, but also extremely professionally edited and produced. So you can also get a full downloaded printed copy of the book. And if I can hold it up, I can't see my video because I've turned it off, but there we are. You can see here it is with its pages and beautiful editing and design. So you can actually right this minute, if you want to, you can go in and you can download a copy of this book, and Ingrid can perhaps put the link in the chat for you, or I'll do so just now. But you can actually download the whole book in PDF completely free. So we were very excited about this because so much of the books that we produce are so expensive that we actually can't afford to buy them ourselves. We've published with Routledge before and with Springer, and in both cases we weren't able to buy the books because they're extremely expensive when they come to us in pounds and dollars and so on. So we really are trying to innovate in making this research accessible to all of our teachers, our teacher educators across the country, and to our libraries as well. So we really would welcome you to also download the book and enjoy reading it if you'd like to. And then I just wanted to also invite you to celebrate with the authors by also downloading your book. And this is a beautiful slide that Ingrid prepared with all of the different authors of the book, and you can see a great community of practice and a lovely group of authors and researchers. And of course, there's their ringleader in the middle and the person who actually made all of this happen. If it wasn't for Ingrid and her energy and her persistence and her care, this book would never have come to see the light of day. So I just want to congratulate Ingrid and her team, and yeah, just to have been part of this journey for so many years now. It's lovely to see it coming through in a book. So thank you very much, Ingrid. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Hela. It was nice to have you present it, and yeah, thanks for the energy also that went into helping us make it happen. So now I think we'll leave questions until the end, just to make sure we don't run out. So Elizabeth, you're up next. Assuming, yeah, you're now unmuted. Are you able to share?
I don't believe so. Let me see.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. It is working now.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead. And I'll allow you just to introduce yourself, Elizabeth, if that's all right, just so I don't take up much of your time.
Sure. One moment, please. Okay, here we go. It's an honor to be with all of you. I've been a participant at many of your webinars, and I've always learned so much from this international audience. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be a presenter today. My name is Elizabeth Crawford, and I'm an associate professor of elementary education at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, located on the North Carolina coast on the Atlantic. And I'm here today to present on my new co-authored book entitled Worldwise Learning, A Teacher's Guide to Shaping a Just Sustainable Future. So similar to the other authors, my co-author and I, Carla Marshall, we started writing this book right before the pandemic hit. She's located in Singapore. She's a curriculum expert and had written another book that I was using in my instructional design course on concept-based curriculum and instruction. And Carla and I have never met in person. We hope to one day, but we started working together on this book because we had a similar vision of what school could be like. And so we started working on the book, and then of course the world shut down. So we're pleased that the book actually came to be. It was finally published last fall. And through our book is a more practical guide for K-8 educators and school leaders on how to bring teaching for sustainability into different contexts. So what we did is we synthesized the research in this field and curated 50 practical research-based strategies and created a framework, which I'll present in a moment, on how to facilitate this in different contexts. So during the pandemic, we interviewed via Zoom teachers and school leaders and organizations throughout the world. And we created this guidebook for teachers to show them what teaching for sustainable development might look like in different public, private, and international contexts. So we created a 2-minute book trailer. So I thought instead of me presenting through the book, we created a book trailer and it's nice. It's narrated by a child. So we did that intentionally because our book is about empowering young people. And we hired a filmmaker in Hong Kong. So this was an international effort. And so I'm going to now share with you the book trailer. Please let me know if you can hear this.
Today's students are growing up in an era of accelerating social and ecological change.
Are you able to hear it?
Yes, we can hear. It's a little bit broken, but I think it'll work.
Okay, I'm going to try again.
It's a little bit quiet.
That's better.
Today's students are growing up in an era of accelerating social and ecological change. We face many challenges: racial injustice, climate change, habitat destruction, social and economic inequality, and a global pandemic. Yet, these issues present an opportunity for school transformation. Let's reimagine schools as places for connection and restoration, places where our students can shape a more just and sustainable world, places where students can act as compassionate, knowledgeable, and active citizens. Our world today calls for a different kind of teaching, a pedagogy for people, planet, and prosperity. This book shows educators how to use students' passions, concerns, and lived experiences as a springboard for meaningful learning. Learn how to create democratic classrooms that build belonging and ownership. Engage the heart, head, and hand of our learners through real-world interdisciplinary contexts. Provide opportunities for students to participate actively as global citizens. Develop systems thinking so students can see interconnectedness across scales and create solutions to issues we face. Throughout the world, youth express that they care about global challenges and feel a responsibility to act on them. Yet, many feel ill-prepared to do so. This book explores how we can prepare students to contribute to and thrive in our complex, ever-changing world. Access more than 50 research-grounded strategies and high-quality examples of classroom practice that showcase ways to foster world-wise learning across disciplines and contexts.
So as mentioned in the trailer, our book is framed around this world-wise learning framework and what we call a pedagogy for people, planet, and prosperity. We advocate for a 4-dimensional curriculum that nurtures students' knowledge, skills, understandings, and dispositions. We want them to be able to think critically with compassion, to explore alternative futures, and to take action to ensure human and planetary well-being. In other words, we want students to be able to make decisions that support a more just and sustainable future. So at the center of our world-wise learning framework is a standards-aligned organizing issue. So in my area, I prepare public school teachers who have a set of standards that they must address and curriculum that they're expected to implement. And so we wanted to be practical and realistic about the demands on teachers today. So we show how students with teachers can select meaningful contexts for learning that align with the standards. So for example, if you were to choose the issue of deforestation as a sample organizing issue, you might think about as a teacher, what competencies can you nurture through that issue? What knowledge, skills, dispositions, and understandings might you nurture through an interconnected issue like deforestation? So in our book, and you're welcome to use the chat if you'd like to jot down some ideas, but in our book, we showcase ways to choose an issue of relevance locally, globally, interculturally, that students are interested in, passionate about, concerned about, while at the same time meeting the grade level expectations that the teachers are expected to meet. So what I'm going to do today is to showcase how I bring this into my curriculum design course. This is a graduate level pre-service teacher course here at UNCW. It is fully asynchronous online. So I'm going to show you how I present this content to my pre-service teachers in Canvas as an asynchronous course. And I'll walk you through some sample experiences to show you how my students have responded to designing a curriculum around these social and ecological issues. And importantly, most of my students have not been in a classroom since they were children themselves, and most of them have never written a lesson plan. So they're learning instructional design in their first semester, as well as learning about global challenges. So in our book, we provide, again, a framework, but also a planning process. So as a teacher, how might you proceed through steps in planning around these issues? So the first step in choosing an issue with your learners to the extent possible, finding out what they care about, what they want to explore, creating democratic classrooms. We provide a sample listing of issues organized into 3 columns: people, planet, and prosperity. And of course, these are interrelated issues, but once you provide an entry point through one issue, you may then see how it's linked to other issues in the other columns, for example. But in our book, we provide these different issues that we then replace with more local examples, because we want to promote local learning as much as possible, where students can actually make a difference. We also, because the book is written for grades K through 8, we recognize that a lot of these issues are too overwhelming and complicated and depressing for young children. So we adapt David Sobel's approach to no tragedies before 4th grade. So tragedies can be big, complex issues that are beyond the conceptual and geographical scope of young children. So we provide some alternative issues that young children might explore, such as learning about fairness or plant and animal needs, or creating green spaces in their local community. So one of the sample methods that I want to explore is slow looking. So you may be familiar with slow looking originating from museum education, but it can also be a very powerful tool for curriculum design. So in our book, we show you how to use slow looking to be more intentional and to look with curiosity in your curriculum. Slow looking can also be used with students, which we showcase later in our book. But in terms of slow looking from a teacher's standpoint, we borrow Shari Tishman, who originated this idea. She's an author and researcher at Harvard's Project Zero. She states that slow looking helps us to notice complexities and interrelationships in a specific context, which promotes interdisciplinary thinking in our curriculum design. So for example, practices for slow looking. As a teacher wanting to bring these issues into the curriculum, we provide 5 different ways of thinking about slow looking and noticing with intention. And I'm going to showcase a few of these, setting the schedule and adjusting the scale and the scope. So for example, I have my students go on a slow looking walk. So they walk in their community, it could be on a schoolyard or in their neighborhood, and they make observations and write down inquiry questions that they could explore with children. So this is a student in my online course who took a walk down his street, and he noticed that concepts like cycles, sustainability, habitat, migration, technology, and so forth would be ways of bringing in the concepts and the standards into the curriculum in a very natural way that's very contextual. Another student took a walk down her street till it ended at the Intracoastal Waterway. And so she found that she could teach about this context to address concepts like life cycles of the oysters that live there, living and non-living things, erosion, movement, perspective, and so forth. Students could then explore questions like, how does erosion impact our community? How is supply and demand impacted by the overharvesting of oysters and that kind of thing? So this is one of the slow looking strategies in our book, is to start noticing that these concepts are all around us, and we can make learning meaningful and contextual for children by just paying more attention and slowing down. We also want to develop big picture thinking and systems thinking. So we want to zoom out and we want to think about how our systems interconnected. And so one strategy that we use for that is the Sustainability Compass tool from Compass Education. So this is an example. Being an asynchronous course, we use Jamboard a lot. And so students will map out their ideas in Jamboard, and then we use sticky notes to give each other feedback. So this student who chose deforestation used the Sustainability Compass tool, and you'll notice that it uses the compass points of nature, well-being, society, and economy to think about how do these concepts connect and impact each other across these different elements. And then this also helps to think about what are leverage points to make a difference. So if we want children to impact the issue that they're studying and learning about, what can children do about deforestation as one example? And from here throughout our book, we provide an inquiry cycle, connect, understand, and act, coupled with strategies to design a holistic type of approach for integrating sustainability into the curriculum. And students create then unit plans for children that are aligned with the standards, the SDGs, as well as these local, global, and intercultural issues. So you can see on this page, this student mapped out a unit of study on the global food system. And so students might learn about supply and demand, location and region, stewardship, information, text, and literacy, statistics and mathematics, and interactions across the food system. This is a way to meaningfully bring together the disciplines, which are often taught in their silos, especially in the elementary grades. And so this is a way to bring relevance to the curriculum around an organizing issue, and to show how social studies, science, mathematics, and the language arts can be brought together into this cohesive whole. And so I will provide in the chat the sample unit plan, and I'm also happy to share my syllabus where I provide steps that you might take if using this book or similar books to design integrated units of study around sustainability issues. And unfortunately, our book is not available as a free ebook. It's published by Corwin Press, but I was able to receive a 20% off code. I'll also put this in the online forum. If you order by April 30th, you can save 20% using that code. And I invite you to please stay in touch, and feel free to reach out to email me, or I'm also on social media on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Oh, Elizabeth, it just looks so exciting. I'm very keen on getting hold of the book. Such creativity, and thank you so much. So yeah, again, we'll have opportunities to ask you questions later. So Steve, I believe that you're sharing the next book, so you can start your share, and then we'll.
Does that come up, Ingrid? Sorry.
Again, I can just see you.
Oh dear. Right. Okay.
So you just need to click on the PowerPoint at the.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm just coming around to it. We'll try again, shall we? Share screen. I can't see share screen at the moment, Ingrid. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, let me just make sure that you've got the power to. I'm going to make you co-host. Maybe that was the problem.
No, I cannot see share screen at the moment, I'm afraid.
Should be at the bottom of the.
Yeah, I've got it now.
Bottom middle.
Right, I've got it now. Yep.
Great.
Okay, I think we're a bit slow up in the north here.
You did it earlier, so.
I know. That's always the way, isn't it? Rehearsal.
That's exactly what always happens, isn't it?
Yeah, rehearsal goes better than the actual performance.
There we go. So you just need to, press slideshow and you're away. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Stephen, do you want to introduce?
Right, I'll introduce myself. As you can tell, there are two of us here. First of all, I'd just like to say what a privilege it is to be sharing our book alongside two other books, which is extraordinary, really. We've never, Steve is the only other person I met on the screen that I met in person, but I feel that what we're saying chimes almost exactly with the 18 other participants in this group, and that's remarkable. So I'm Stephen Scottham. I'm one of the co-authors of this book, which is not yet published. It's something slightly different from the other two books. It's coming out on Friday, so it's not long to wait, and it's going to come out on Earth Day. So I'm one of the authors of it, and I've collaborated. I'm based in Canterbury in Kent, in southeast England, and have worked for a long time with teacher education. And I've also collaborated with Steve, who will introduce himself.
Okay, I'm Steve Rawlinston. I'm actually retired now, or I'm supposedly retired, but I think I'm busier now than I was when I was in work. Stephen keeps me incredibly busy, so that's good. But I've taught every age group from the little ones right through to people in their third age, as it were. But I did 21 years in teacher education, training primary teachers. So that's really the background that I'm coming from. And we identified that there was a gap, if you like, in our education system for some kind of text which dealt with sustainability education, both in depth and also in a practical sense. So as Stephen has said, that chimes in with the other presentations we've had today. So what we've offered with this particular book is an in-depth guide and critique of sustainability education. We've tried to break it into three parts. One, which is this in-depth guide of what sustainability is, because that's quite difficult, we think, to pin down. Then, and we've used obviously learning theory and research with that. We've tried to then pin down the pedagogies that go with that sustainability education. And then we've tried to produce a progressive framework for sustainability education, focusing in particular on the 3 to 14 age phase, because we think they're the young people who are going to inherit what we have made a mess of. So we've tried very hard to go through those particular age phases. And that's been quite a challenge because there's quite a difference between a 3-year-old and a 14-year-old, obviously. So it's been quite an exercise in lots of different ways. We'd also, I think, like to say that the book is not just for teachers. It's not just for people that are currently teaching. It's for students that are coming into teaching. It's for teacher trainers, but it's also, we think, for parents, for governors, for people that are involved in framing educational policy. So they've got something that's succinct and concise, and they can see where it's going. And we think perhaps that's been missing in the past. So we've managed to pull together, with the help of some wonderful contributions from other parts of the world, and Ingrid is one of those contributors, over 180 teaching ideas with 30 age-related topics, and they relate to areas right around the world. They're obviously related to the SDGs and the key concepts. And like others, we've got a companion website with extensive free online resources that go with it. So there's a website that we're hoping we will continue to add to over the years with new ideas and new resources, teaching plans, that type of thing. It is available in print and ebook format. It comes out on Friday, and I will give you a wonderful discount code a bit later on.
So
okay.
Before we leave that screen, just a couple of things which I might add.
Yeah.
The companion website can be found on the Bloomsbury site. So if you go to the Bloomsbury site and just put in our title, it'll take you to that picture of the cover, and then you scroll right down to the bottom, and we've got a huge range of resources which are available for free. Unfortunately or fortunately, the book is separate, as it were, and it's not hugely expensive, but it is something you've got to pay for. The other thing is perhaps to flag up that point about the other two books, I think, have more specific links to their particular jurisdictions and the curricula in those jurisdictions, and there's very good reasons for that. We've shied away from that, partly because the curriculum for England really doesn't give us much of a handle on sustainability, which is, well, you can draw your own conclusions from that, something that you might find surprising. So we've keyed it in to the SDGs because we felt those had international currency and energy behind them. And we've also keyed them in very strongly to concepts. So we've tried to identify a range of concepts which we think underpin sustainability education. And those concepts are bigger and broader than the ecological concepts, which are so often the ones which are foregrounded in ESD work. And we're excited about the way in which what emerges from this is a sense of what does it look like for a child to be reasonably sustainability literate at different age ranges. So there's a sense of progression that comes across, which is, again, so difficult to achieve in this work. And we don't think we've got all the answers, but we've certainly enjoyed exploring the issues. So the next slide really gives you an idea of the structure of the book. And at the center, in that sort of tangerine colored box, classroom practice and implementation, which in a sense looks very simple when the teacher goes into the classroom and we go into the classroom. You've got so many children, you've got to do something, you decide what you're going to do and you get on with it. You know, that seems to be what you witness, but of course there's a huge amount going on around the edges. And so if you go to the left-hand side of the diagram, again, a bit like Helia and Ingrid, the first book, we've got 4 parts, but understanding sustainability, unpacking what it means, recognizing some of the theory and the research that goes into it. And I think one of the things which we've highlighted is this wonderful concept from Gert Biester that sustainability might be characterized as arousing in children a desire to question whether what they desire is desirable. Bit of a mouthful, but arousing the desire, so it can't actually be imposed, it's something that has to be evoked, arousing the desire to question whether what they desire is desirable. And that goes to, cuts through the chase of modern capitalism and goes straight through to values and what we think really matters in life. And so that's the green box. And then we switched in part 2 to the right-hand side of the diagram, which is the light blue box, where we're thinking about, well, what does this mean in classroom terms? What does this mean about how we manage our curriculum? What does this mean about how we teach? And of course, the things which you've heard earlier about practical pedagogies, about active learning, and so on, are very much in our minds. And equally, we offer some thoughts about whole school planning and whole school management, the different case studies from schools in different parts of the world about how they've gone about their sustainability work. And that ranges from Steiner schools, non-formal settings like forest schools, through to a school hub in Southeast London, which has structured its entire curriculum around the SDGs. And so that's a completely different one. Or another example, which is a school where the children were so disappointed that the local authority hadn't declared a climate change emergency that they went to the head teacher and convinced the head teacher and governors that the school should do it. So lots and lots of inspiring examples are knocking around, but the practical teaching ideas are for everybody right across the curriculum. And the other, the narratives, or as it were, and the context, things which are going on around about us at the top, that awareness that we've all got that actually we're going over the cliff. And we're going over the cliff very fast at the moment, and have education is so slow to wake up to what's happening. I was reading a new text this morning where Stephen Sterling was talking about the way in which higher education had an astonishing disconnect between what's going on in the world about it and what practice actually goes on in HE. And that's a point that keeps on coming up. And the bottom diagram, perhaps the most part of the diagram, that purple box, perhaps the most important bit of the lot, that it's our mindsets, it's the narratives of who we are, what matters to us, our deeply held cultural beliefs, which underpin the civilization which has taken us to the point where we are. But like in many civilizations, in fact, all previous civilizations collapse at one point or another. Have we got to the point where the narratives which served us so well no longer serve us well in the future? So all those things impinging and trying to make sense of it is something which Steve and I have been grappling with right through lockdown, and we've ended up with this book, which we're very excited about.
And I think one of the things that we wanted to introduce you to is the fact that it's sometimes quite difficult to keep grounded in these areas. You can go off on your own little sweep and end up with something that is not as much use as it could be to people. So we'd like to introduce you to Stevie. I'm Steve, Stephen. So our little phantom teacher had to be Stevie. And all the way through the writing of the book, we kept coming back to, would Stevie understand this? What questions would Stevie ask? What does Stevie need to know about this topic? And we found that incredibly useful technique to have Stevie, as it were, on our shoulder, guiding our writing and our reading and our thinking. And I think that the thing comes out much better because we had Stevie there. And we'd just like to give you a few thoughts about Stevie. She's guided and critiqued our thinking. She's a young teacher, probably in her early career, and she's very keen and passionate to offer the best education about sustainability to the children in her care.
And she's also aware that sustainability is a broad concept. I like that idea that you bold us, that it's complex, uncertain, and essentially incomplete.
Yeah.
And it's much more than just turning off the lights. It's much more than just recycling. It's bigger even than climate change, although climate change is clearly very important. And so she's got that idea that it's something really big that needs to be at the center and not a bolt-on.
Yep. And so she needs a book which considers the broad sweep of sustainability from different angles and different viewpoints. And it's only by looking at those that she can then devise lessons and specific encounters, if you like, with sustainability for her children. And we hope that from Stevie's perspective, this feels like she has the book she knew she needed, but she couldn't find.
A book that's accessible, a book that speaks to classroom practice, a book that's informed by research, all those things coming together. And so we hope you too find something in it that you were looking for, and perhaps as you turn the pages or look at the website, perhaps something you didn't know that you actually needed to find.
So if you need to contact us or you'd like to contact us, our contact details are there. Fairly straightforward, and we're both on Twitter, and we both use Twitter quite a bit. So if you do want to contact us, please do so. And the discount code is 20% on the book when you purchase it through the Bloomsbury website. Those codes are slightly different for those of you that are in different parts of the world. So just take note of the ones that reply to you. But thank you very much indeed for listening, and we're very excited about the book. We can't wait for Friday and the launch, and it's very fortuitous that it's on Earth Day. We think that's something has aligned at that point, we think.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stevie, for those contributions. If you wouldn't mind popping those codes into the chat, I think that would help people when they could access them.
Yeah.
So wonderful. There's lots of positive comments in the chat. And yeah, let's see if there are any hands up. If people have questions, I think it's mostly positive comments. So as far as I can see, there aren't yet any questions. So I'm inviting hands and questions.
I have a question.
Thanks. Who's that? Lorna?
Hold on, this is Alita.
Oh, Alita, there we go. Okay, great.
Thank you so much for everyone who was able to present your amazing works and all the talent that you've been able to put into pages. I have a question for all of the authors, and it's really a matter of process. I know that as you're going through these working strategies and just considering what students can relate to, you may have run into some findings that you realize it's about to get controversial, or we might get in trouble for putting this. So I wanted you to just mention some examples of when you ran into those and also how you tackled the situation.
I see you're nodding, Elizabeth, almost as if you've got something to say. So I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'm going to let you go. And Stephen and Steve, if you want to put up your hands, you're welcome.
I think that's such a good question, especially in the US context right now. So I've taught the instructional design course that I mentioned, that I framed this book around for many years. And previously I would select the issues that we explored together as a class, but then I realized I wasn't modeling the approaches for student-centered curriculum design that I was advocating for. And so once I allowed students to select the issues that they cared about, they sort of lead their own learning. So with my pre-service teachers, I avoid any kind of contentious, contention in the classroom amongst the students if the students themselves are becoming the leaders of the course in a sense, and I'm more the facilitator. And I think that's what we want them to do in the classroom with young children too, is to explore the questions that children have. So it's not perceived that the adult in the classroom is trying to guide students to think a certain way or believe a certain way. But if we support inquiry learning in the classroom that's driven by the students, I think that's a lot safer in terms of avoiding any kinds of issues with the current context that we're in.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Stephen, you were nodding as if you wanted to speak.
Yes, I think it's such a good question, that one, and I'm not going to pretend that I've got all the answers. What I would say is that at various points we touch on questions about indoctrination and bias, and of course that can happen in any curriculum area, and teachers are very good at handling that, and they're well aware of the pitfalls, and actually schools are pretty conservative places, so the brakes are on before you even begin in a very practical sort of way, but there is a different set of agendas, as it were. When we get into action and we all want to see more than just desk learning, where does that action take you? And if you take the lid off, is it going to actually lead to children becoming, or pupils of different ages becoming excessively, sort of overstepping the mark? And that's something the British government has just been issuing guidance, and they're terrified of practical action and demonstrations and things like that. So the guidance is basically to try and stop children going on school strikes and campaigning on the streets. because they don't think that that is something that should be happening. And so there is a sharp end to this. And I don't think we touch on it, we mention it, but we sidestep it in a little way because we've got a lot of in-text questions for students to discuss. And so this very nicely makes a student discussion question.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll also respond quickly as just regarding the question around controversial issues. What's quite interesting is I find often a kind of ideological clash where we have the rhetoric in the beginning of our curriculum, you know, the principles that guide our curriculum that are around critical thinking, active learning, holistic perspective on environment and justice, and then when you see kind of how the topics are constructed, there's this internal contradiction in the curriculum. So I think that's one of our big challenges is always, well, if you want the learners to, you know, develop this critical thinking, active learning, you have to rethink the whole curriculum and the pedagogy that goes with it. So an ongoing challenge for us. Thanks for that question, Aletha. And I have a question for Elizabeth from McQuenna. Elizabeth, have you seen the question in the chat? Do you want to?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
If you could go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's both in terms of the issues bring relevance to the curriculum, but they're also connected to the standards that the teachers are expected to address. So currently here in the US, a lot of school districts are actually moving toward more standardized curriculum than the past. We thought it would change during the pandemic, but a lot of schools are adopting and districts are adopting scripted curricula. So this has been a challenge where teachers are expected to read scripts and literacy and mathematics in particular. And so my goal is to show my pre-service teachers who are becoming teachers that they can bring relevance into the curriculum around these organizing issues that address the same concepts and skills that are in the standards. And so that usually happens more in social studies and science, where they have a little bit more flexibility and autonomy, because currently most of my teachers are working in districts that have scripted literacy and scripted mathematics curriculum. So in our book, we try to show how these issues are interdisciplinary by nature, and so they can make connections and develop a more robust unit of study around issues that the children want to explore. And I hope that answers that question. And then in terms of slow looking is a bit different. It is observation, but it's more intentional observation, that there are many different protocols that have been created by Project Zero organizations like Agency by Design and the Artful Thinking Palette and some others, where they include some scaffolds or thinking routines to look closely and intentionally. For example, you might look at a piece of artwork or a photograph for 10 seconds and write down initial impressions, and then return and revisit the artwork or photograph for 20 seconds and think about, what do you see differently? Or you might zoom in and zoom out. So you might use magnifying glasses or something like that so it's more focused, intentional observation that includes scaffolds or thinking routines to help you see things that you may not have noticed before.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you for that question. We have Paul with a hand up.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I work in Canada, in Ontario, and a really big part of the work that we've been doing across the country relates to post-colonialism and its links to sustainability education. And the fact that prior to colonization, the communities here lived in a more or less sustainable way. And obviously that applies to the US as well. So I'd be interested to hear from Elizabeth whether whether that synergy is being plugged into south of the border. But also, I guess it could certainly apply to South Africa as well. So I'd like to know whether there's much of a movement to draw on traditional teachings as part of sustainability education.
I think there are certainly pockets in the United States where, for example, Indigenous perspectives have been more intentionally brought into the science curriculum, and to have students explore different ways of knowing and being. It is not, I would not say it's mainstream. Is that your question, whether different perspectives are intentionally brought into sustainability education?
Yeah, I think increasingly that is happening in Canada. I mean, with the residential school history, there's been a huge focus in the last few years on reconciliation. And I think those of us involved in sustainability education work are realizing that there's a great synergy to be had if you bring that together with the work that we're doing.
I think there's so much diversity across the 50 US states, where you see it happening in Minnesota and California and in other states. It is not as prevalent here where I am in North Carolina. It's slowly becoming something that is being focused on here at the university, land acknowledgements and so forth, learning who used to live here and who still lives here. But it is not mainstream, but I hope that it will become so.
Thanks for that response, Elizabeth. And I know Paul was also asking about South Africa. I was wondering whether my colleague Rob would like to respond to the question around Indigenous knowledge in the curriculum, Indigenous perspectives. Rob is certainly one of our colleagues who's done a lot of work here. So Rob, if you're there, you're very welcome to give us your perspectives. He's not unmuting. But again, I'd like to, if Rob's not going to jump in, I'd just like to say that I think this is another one of the things that for me becomes quite rhetorical. Again, it's one of the principles of our curriculum, the importance of that integration. And we do have some really fantastic work that has been done, and again, particularly in science education, around realizing the links between or often the similarities and the strong sort of rigorous work that underpins Indigenous knowledge. And so there's some fantastic work being done there in relation to that. I see Janet also, who works with Rob, is saying, Paul is mentioning Indigenous teaching in our current Fundisa for Change. About Indigenous knowledge, we rather look at the incorporation of IK in science education, as I've mentioned. So yes, nice perspectives there, bringing in Indigenous teaching, the idea of Indigenous teaching. Sorry, I'm busy managing lots of...
Could I respond a little bit to that?
Yes, please, Janet.
Sorry. I think one of the things, and I'm very pleased, thank you, Paul, for mentioning that from the perspective of what is the Indigenous teaching, and really gets us to start to think more about it. And one, I was hoping that Rob would be able to identify, come in, because he is really the expert in this field. And I just listen with awe at all that he has to say about this. But one of the perspectives that he's brought into this Fundisa course, which we are currently running, is the Kamishibai and using storytelling as a means of putting forward the concepts. And I found that very interesting. And I think our teachers have really resonated very well with that and using storytelling a lot more than just information sharing. I hope that helps a little bit in our thinking, and you have made me think about our way forward in looking at Indigenous teaching rather than just about Indigenous knowledge.
Thank you, Janet. And I see Lorna has her hand up. Please go ahead, Lorna.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Just perhaps a more direct question to what Paul raised. I wonder, would any of these books be banned in Florida?
That's an interesting question.
I guess everybody knows what's happening in Florida, right? And the banning of books.
No, I don't. But
oh, sorry.
Don't. If you can say in a sentence.
Well, for example, books are being banned that refer in any way to race or, gender. If there's any kind of
right.
Okay, I don't know.
Got
the phrase has become a bad word, a bad phrase, critical theory. Yeah. So I was just wondering. Yeah.
I would like to think our book would be banned. Yeah.
For my answer to that would be if the SDGs would be banned in Florida because they talk about social justice, equality, and all gender and race, then our book would be banned as well.
Yeah, it seems like a conversation we need to have, Lorna. So some quite shocking things that you hear from different parts of the world, despite all of the work that we're doing. Quite a lot of undoing as well. So yeah, we are talking about, by the way, bringing in a theme on political education. So, highlighting politics and political issues in education. So it sounds like this is something that we need. Yeah. All right. I'm just managing various hands and chats here. All right. I hope, just shout, please put up your hand or even unmute yourself if I've missed you or missed an important point. The one thing I would like to add, or just to point out as we end, is that we've gone all the way around the world in 3 continents, which has been really great to see the work happening in 3 corners of the world, and of course there are more. So we're looking forward to hearing about new work and new books. So just to encourage all of you here, if you've got materials to share, I think this is quite a nice thing to do at least once a year, if not more. And then also just to say that Lorna is also, as far as I understand, presenting her book in the next session. So this is certainly not all of the books. There are many of them out there. And so we'd love to give that opportunity to give people a platform for sharing.
Sorry, just a correction, Ingrid.
Yes,
it's Lorna and Therese.
Oh, sorry, Lorna and Therese. Sorry, Therese, for leaving you out there. So, okay. And then there's another book recommended from Elizabeth there. So there's certainly lots of materials out there. All right. So I think, thank you everybody for your comments and contributions. And if there are no more pressing questions, then I'm going to close the meeting. So there's some thank yous coming through. Thank you for your time, and thank you to our presenters. And sadly, Hala had to leave early, but also thanks to her in her absence for presenting on our behalf. Right, take care everybody, stay in touch. Don't forget to visit the course networking platform. If you want to continue any conversations or ask questions, then that's always a place to keep going until we see each other again in a month's time. Thank you and cheers. I'm going to stop the recording.